Griff. Now back to the Saudi journalist investigation. There are indications tonight the Saudis are narrowing their search for someone to blame, even as Turkish investigators are expanding their search for answers about what happened to Jamal Khashoggi. One major development, clues about the final resting place, perhaps, of the journalist's remains. Correspondent Benjamin Hall is in Istanbul tonight.
Turkish police are now looking for Jamal Khashoggi's body, 17 days after he went missing. The focus has been a forest and farmland outside Istanbul. It's where Turkish authorities believe his remains may have been disposed. Two vans which left the consulate on October the 2nd drove in that direction and are unaccounted for 2 hours. Turkish authorities are also questioning 15 employees of the consulate, including technicians, accountants and telephone operators. On the day of Khashoggi's disappearance, local staff had been given the day off. Now Turkish authorities claim they will soon release the results of their investigation.
We are waiting for the results of the examinations, including laboratory results. We will share the results that emerge transparently with the whole world.
Evidence continues to mount against Saudi Arabia. There is now growing focus on one man claimed to be Saudi intelligence, Maher Mutreb, who has travelled with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on at least one international tour. Stills released by Turkey show him arriving at the consulate hours before Khashoggi and leaving soon afterwards. Adding to the mystery, a pro-government Turkish media outlet reported that another of the suspects, Mashal al-Bostani, a 31-year-old lieutenant in the Saudi Air Force, died in a suspicious car accident in Riyadh 2 days ago. But the Saudi investigation is also picking up. Sources claim the suspects named by Turkey have all now been interrogated, with some denying they had even been in Turkey at all, though many doubt Saudi is able to conduct a neutral investigation.
There is no doubt that were the Saudis to conduct an investigation into the enforced disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi, the findings would not be credible in any way. They cannot be credible.
One other name which keeps cropping up is Ahmad al-Assiri, a two-star general and vice president of Saudi intelligence. There are now growing reports he may have been the man who ordered Khashoggi's interrogation, and rumours suggest they may be planning on pinning the blame on him. And we are still hearing that the Saudi investigation may well suggest that this was an interrogation gone wrong, that it was sanctioned at high levels of the Saudi government, but not as high as Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And just, Brett, in the last few moments, we're getting reports, unconfirmed yet, that Saudi state TV is reporting Khashoggi's death and that they have fired a top general. So we'll wait to bring you more evidence of that in the coming moments. Brett?
Yeah, Benjamin, I'd keep you here for a second. It's just breaking over these wires that Saudi Arabia is confirming Khashoggi killed in Istanbul consulate. Top Saudi intelligence official fired. That from AFP. Some other wires now moving this story. It is, we should note, 1 in the morning in Riyadh, and obviously putting out this news. We don't have the full statement as of yet, but as you mentioned in your piece, this is where this was heading for some days.
That's right, and there has been such pressure on the Saudi government ever since Secretary of State Mike Pompeo went there a couple of days ago to come up with their investigation. They have been saying for a few days they would release it shortly. All along, this was the direction we thought they would be going, and in fact, we know that they sent one of their key princes over to Turkey last week to discuss moves forward. It seems like now we may be getting their version of the story, but that's big news right now, confirming for the first time that Khashoggi is dead, and then the firing of that general suggesting that they will be pinning the blame on him. Brett?
Still getting more, and we're going to update throughout the show, but the Saudis saying 18 arrested according to Reuters, and there are investigations still going on. This is at the direction of the king. Benjamin, thank you. We'll update throughout the show as we get more breaking news. The U.S. and South Korea are canceling another major military exercise, the Pentagon citing a push for diplomatic progress with North Korea. It says the air exercise, known as Vigilant Ace, is being tabled, quote, to give the diplomatic process every opportunity to continue. In June, the Pentagon canceled this year's Freedom Guardian exercise after President Trump called the drills provocative and expensive. Stocks today were mixed. The Dow finished ahead 65. The S&P 500 lost 1. The Nasdaq dropped 36. For the week, the Dow was up 0.4 of a percentage point, snapping a 3-week losing streak. The S&P 500 gained 0.02. The Nasdaq lost 2/3 of a point. Let's get a wrap-up of this volatile week and examine where we may go from here. Deirdre Bolton of the Fox Business Network joins us again from New York. Good evening, Deirdre.
Good evening, Brett. October is living up to its reputation of being the most volatile month in the calendar. Worries about higher interest rates, international trade tensions, and global political concerns responsible for the red arrows. The bright spots in the market, they're based on solid earnings results and strong economic underpinnings. To that point, results from Procter & Gamble and American Express added about 65 points to the Dow today. On Wednesday, the Labor Department showed that open jobs outnumber workers for the 6th straight month. So it's an 18-year point of strength for workers. In theory, Americans with better, higher-paying jobs will spend more money, and that makes the economy grow more. For today, the Dow closed higher. It was also up for the week, snapping a 3-week losing streak. We are at the start of earnings season. So far, 20% of the S&P 500 companies have reported results. Close to 80% have exceeded forecasts. So for trading sentiment, that's important. Some strategists had voiced concern that earnings expectations were too high. Companies that miss, such as IBM, are punished. Earlier this week, the company failed to meet sales expectations, failed to forecast expected revenue growth. Tech really struggling this month. The Dow closing, or rather the Nasdaq closing slightly lower on the day, lower on the week, and it is actually the 3rd week down in a row for the Nasdaq, which is its longest losing streak in 14. Apple announcing a new event in Brooklyn on October 30th, so that may rebuild some excitement for the tech sector towards the end of the month. Brett, back to you.
Okay, Deirdre, thank you. A Russian woman is accused tonight of trying to sway American public opinion through social media in the first federal case alleging foreign interference in the 2018 midterm election. Elena Alexeyevna is charged with managing the finances of a Russian social media network that created false profiles and email accounts aimed at producing and amplifying divisive content. The Justice Department unsealed the criminal complaint today, on the same day that U.S. intelligence agencies, in a rare public statement, asserted that Russia, China, Iran, and other countries are engaged in continuous efforts to influence American policy and voters in the upcoming midterm elections and beyond. Meantime, the woman in the middle of the investigation into the Justice Department's relationship with the company that provided the so-called Trump dossier told her story today to a House committee, or at least some of it. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Harris joins us tonight from Capitol Hill with today's appearance by Nellie Orr. Good evening, Catherine.
Thank you, Brett, and good evening. Fusion GPS contractor Nellie Orr voluntarily answered questions for 5 hours. She was described as cooperative. But Republican lawmakers said they never got to their key question, how and why her husband, a senior Justice Department official, passed the anti-Trump dossier to the FBI during the 2016 election, because they say Orr invoked spousal privilege, which protects a couple's communications.
It's been a big waste of time. I didn't learn a whole lot in this exercise.
There was privileges that she took, spousal privileges, communication between her and her husband, which I fully understand, and yet at the same time, that's at the crux of the matter.
Nellie's husband, Bruce Orr, answered questions in August. Republicans want FBI interviews with Bruce Orr declassified because they say he told the Bureau the dossier's author, former British spy Christopher Steele, had an anti-Trump bias. Nellie's boss, Glenn Simpson, whose firm Fusion GPS was behind the dossier, took the fifth before the same House panel. On next week's closed-door classified interview with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein about Russia and allegations he discussed secretly recording the president, there was a bipartisan call for transparency.
I'd like it to be more open. I'd like it to be more transparent because a lot of people have questions.
The idea that it's going to happen with just 2 members from the Republican Party, just 2 members from the Democrat Party in a classified setting which means one thing: the American people will never know what's said. So that is completely unacceptable.
Republican lawmakers say Rosenstein should not get special treatment. He should be handled like any other witness in the probe. Brett.
Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Up next, a Fox News exclusive. Evidence Iran is sending sophisticated weaponry to Hezbollah terrorists. We're going to take a break here, but we're following the breaking news out of Riyadh, and that is that Riyadh is saying that Jamal Khashoggi was in fact killed in the consulate in Istanbul. We'll go back live to Istanbul for the latest about what the Saudis are saying and who may be blamed for this death. This is a Fox News alert. We are just getting word out of Riyadh that Saudi officials are now saying that Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi journalist who was a columnist also for the Washington Post, did in fact die inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. The Saudis, a prosecutor there, announcing the arrest of 18 people. All are Saudis in this case. They are saying that the death occurred after a, quote, quarrel or fight at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. These are just from wire reports, various wires, AFP, Reuters, others. We're waiting for the official statement. Remember, it's 1 in the morning in Riyadh, and we are trying to get exactly what is being said at this hour. We're going to head back live to Istanbul. This is a Fox News alert. We are just getting word out of Riyadh that Saudi officials are now saying that Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi journalist who was a columnist also for the Washington Post, did in fact die inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. The Saudis, a prosecutor there, announcing the arrest of 18 people. All are Saudis in this case. They are saying that the death occurred after a, quote, quarrel or fight at the Saudi consulate. Quarrel or fight at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. These are just from wire reports, various wires, AFP, Reuters, others. We're waiting for the official statement. Remember, it's 1 in the morning in Riyadh, and we are trying to get exactly what is being said at this hour. We're going to head back live to Istanbul, and we'll bring back John Roberts from the North Lawn to see if there's any White House reaction to this. This coming, obviously, after the Secretary of State traveled to Riyadh to talk to the Saudis on this, as well as going to Turkey, talking to Turkish officials. But again, the Saudis admitting that Jamal Khashoggi was killed inside their consulate in Istanbul. More in just a moment. Also breaking tonight, a Trump administration official confirms National Security Advisor John Bolton will inform Russia next week the U.S. intends to pull out of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Treaty. The official saying that will allow the U.S. to better address the growing threat from China. The State Department has held the position the U.S. is complying with this treaty while Russia is in violation. Tonight, a Fox News exclusive that could also have major implications in the Middle East. National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin has obtained information about Iran's latest effort to provide sophisticated weapons to Hezbollah terrorists. And Israel, as you can imagine, is not happy about it at all. Jennifer Griffin from the Pentagon.
Western intelligence sources believe Iran has been increasing its shipments of advanced weaponry to Hezbollah, deliveries which now include GPS components to make previously unguided rockets into precision-guided missiles, increasing the threat to Israel. One of the Iranian flights arrived in Lebanon 3 days ago, officials tell Fox News. Iran's Fars Air Qeshm, flight number QFZ-9950, departed Tehran International Airport on Tuesday. Later in the day, the Boeing 747 jet touched down in Syria's capital, Damascus, before continuing on to Beirut. On Wednesday, the Iranian cargo plane departed Beirut for Doha, Qatar, and returned to Iran's capital Thursday evening. Just last month at the UN General Assembly, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu shared photos of what he said were 3 Hezbollah secret sites near Beirut's international airport, locations where he alleges the GPS components were being assembled. In an exclusive interview with Fox News, a former head of Israeli military intelligence says it's part of Tehran's plan to increase its influence throughout the region.
The Iranian goal is to build in Syria and in Lebanon a ballistic missile force.
General Amos Yadlin was not aware of this recent cargo shipment from Tehran, but is intimately familiar with Israel's past use of preemptive strikes. He was one of 8 F-16 fighter pilots who bombed Iraq's nuclear reactor in 1981 and helped plan Israel's strike on Syria's nascent nuclear reactor in 2007.
Israel is determined not to let it happen. This is a source of concern Because if the Iranians, on one hand, determined to build this precision project with ballistic missiles, this is a recipe for collision.
Iran's Fars Air Keshem airline has long been accused by Western intelligence officials of flying arms for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard.
The Israeli military has conducted more than 200 airstrikes inside Syria since last year, targeting Iranian weapons shipments. Brett?
Jennifer, thank you. With breaking news again, the Saudis saying that Jamal Khashoggi was killed in that consulate in Istanbul, saying discussions that occurred between the reporter Jamal Khashoggi and the people that were questioning him while in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul led to an argument and fighting with hands, which led to his death, according to the Saudis. Also, that King Salman has fired the deputy intelligence chief, Ahmad al-Assiri. We will go live to Turkey and the White House for the latest on this breaking news out of Riyadh and the fate of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. This is a Fox News alert breaking right now. Reports that Saudi Arabia's government is admitting that journalist Jamal Khashoggi was killed inside their consulate, and now getting more information about who's being fired, who's being arrested, who they're blaming. And the question is whether the White House, the Trump administration, will accept any of that or what comes next. We have Fox team coverage of the breaking news. Go to Roberts, John Roberts at the White House on the North Lawn in just a moment. First, back to Istanbul, Benjamin Hall with the latest. Benjamin?
Yeah, hi, Brett. Well, I've been speaking to Saudi sources, and this information all coming out in the last few minutes. According to Saudi state television, quoting the state prosecutor, Saudi Arabia have now arrested 18 people. The majority of them were the same individuals pictured by Turkey in that CCTV footage. They say that initially 2 days ago when arrested, they denied everything. They have now finally confessed. Now, the story they're giving is that a fight ensued at the consulate between these people and Khashoggi, and that led to his death. They are still claiming it was an accident. On top of that, we're learning two much higher-ranking officials have now been fired and are under arrest. One of them, the man we mentioned in our package, General Ahmad, he was vice president of the intelligence service. He was the spokesman for the Saudi-led war in Yemen. He was educated and trained in the US and the UK. He has now fallen, as has another minister. Now, we're also gathering that the King of Saudi Arabia, King Salman, has reached out to President Erdogan. He called him about 40 minutes ago to tell him the state of the investigation, to thank him for his ongoing patience and to say that the relationship between the two countries was still strong. Now they're already talking in Saudi Arabia about a total restructuring of the intelligence services. Still a lot of unanswered questions, but here is Saudi Arabia putting out its version of events finally. 18 arrested, quite high-leveled, but firm denials that the Saudi royals had anything to do with it. Mohammed bin Salman himself knew nothing about it. That's the line I'm hearing from Saudi Arabia. But this is the story. It was an accident. It was a fight between Khashoggi and these 15 individuals in the consulate. So some big breaking news. We're trying to get more details as they come. But certainly a restructuring of the Saudi intelligence services, and of course the big question, why were 15 of them there to question him? What did the Crown Prince know about it, if anything? And a lot more to come. Where is the body?
Yeah, well, that's the big one.
So those questions will come to the forefront.
That's the big one. I don't see any write-up in any of these releases from the Saudis about where the body is, nor any addressing of the Turkish officials who've been talking to reporters on the ground about a bone saw being used and the body being chopped up and put in different places. The Saudis don't address where Khashoggi is now if he died in that consulate.
No, and I suggest that there'll be an element of deniability there, as they're saying they didn't know that this was taking place, and presumably the investigation will still be ongoing for them. But in terms of the relationship with Turkey, we do know that there's been dialogue between the two countries going back at least a week now, and certainly there was a call between King Salman and President Erdogan 2 days ago, and another one just in the last hour or so. So that's the direction they're going. A lot of unanswered questions, but certainly this is what they're laying out. And remember, it's 1 a.m. in the morning in Saudi Arabia. It's an interesting time to release this information on a Friday night, so we'll see what comes of it and how much more they release to us. But a couple of really big names there falling at the top of this mystery.
We know Friday night dumps of news here in Washington pretty well. Benjamin, thank you. We'll check in with more breaking news. Let's go to the White House. John Roberts on the North Lawn. John, I assume the White House is absorbing this, but there are a lot of questions here, and the big one is whether they're going to accept this and what comes next and how Congress reacts as well.
Yeah, there's no official response from the White House just yet. I got off the phone a second ago with a senior official who said the president's in Arizona. He's a couple of hours time difference away. He's got that rally tonight. They're trying to formulate a response. We hope to have something in the not too distant future. But this really is kind of playing out the way that we thought it would for the last 24, 36 hours with Ahmad al-Assiri, this intelligence official being fired from his job and blamed for this operation. Interesting to note that this other fellow, Saud al-Qahtani, who was known as the media enforcer, in some circles he was known as Saudi Arabia's Steve Bannon, has been sacked as well. The president just a short time ago in Arizona, when he was signing a bill about water for the West, said it's too early to tell what the White House response might be, but that if there is any kind of a response, the president will work together with Congress on it. What's interesting is that between al-Assiri and al-Qahtani, this remains outside the orbit of Mohammed bin Salman. If it had been inside that orbit, certainly the response would be different. The question is, will the White House buy it? Will Congress buy it? Perhaps is the more important question. When he was questioned about it today, the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said, "I'm not going to get into what the responses might be. We'll certainly consider a wide range of potential responses," but that he told the Saudi leadership the United States does not approve of extrajudicial killings. But this is quite telling what the Secretary of State said. He said, once we have identified the fact set, then they, Saudi Arabia, have the responsibility in the first instance to hold accountable those inside their country that may have been involved in any wrongdoing. So if you read between the lines with that statement, if this stays outside the orbit of the royal family, if it stays outside the orbit of the main Saudi leadership, then, Brett, it could be that this will be viewed by the United States as an internal Saudi matter. Now, there is the issue that Jamal Khashoggi did work here in the United States for an American company, but he was not a permanent resident. He was here on a work visa, so that may play into all of this as well. Yeah. Again, too early to know what the White House response will be. They're working on it.
John, we're being told that Secretary of State Pompeo is aware of the Saudi statement. He is on his way back to Washington from Mexico City. His talks there. The question Washington Post David Ignatius raised in a column was, what did the U.S. intelligence community know about the efforts to go after Khashoggi? When did they know it? And how does that factor in? It seems like with all that the Turks have been leaking, whether accurate or not, to journalists on the ground with specific detail and gruesome detail, that there will be many more questions than answers in the next hours on this story.
There will, and particularly this idea that Khashoggi went to the consulate to get the papers that he needed to get married and was told, well, we don't have the information that you need to come back. And in that ensuing time, this operation was put together. And clearly, if you're arranging some sort of squad that's going to go in there and abduct him or go in there to, with the intent to kill him, that's potentially going to show up on some intelligence intercepts. So it would be interesting to know what American intelligence knows about the depth of all of this, and the fact that we have, while not tremendous relations with Turkey, we do have cooperative agreements with them as a NATO country. So I think a lot more is going to come out on this as the days progress.
Yeah, John Roberts at the White House. We'll head back with any breaking details. John, thanks. As Saudi Arabia announces this news, we will talk about it all with the panel. Breaking news here on Special Report. After a quick break, we'll be back.
It is out of the question for Turkey to give Pompeo or any other U.S. official any audio recording.
I've heard no tape, I've seen no transcript, and the network that reported that ought to pull down the headline that says I have. We should be factual when we report things about this. This is a very serious matter that we're working diligently on. And so to put out headlines that are factually false does no one any good.
Secretary of State Pompeo talking about an ABC report that he had heard this audio that the Turks had of Khashoggi's death and of a transcript, and he says that's absolutely false. This as the breaking news. The Saudis saying, in fact, he was killed in that consulate, that 18 people have been arrested, that 2 people, senior officials, the deputy intelligence director essentially, and an advisor to the Crown Prince have been fired by the royal court and King Salman. Let's bring in our panel. panel with the breaking news. Jason Riley, Wall Street Journal columnist and senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. A.B. Stoddard, associate editor at Real Clear Politics. And David Brody, chief political analyst for the Christian Broadcasting Network. Thanks for scrambling on the breaking news here. Jason, thoughts?
Well, I think there are two issues here. One, what is Saudi Arabia going to do about this, and what are we going to do about Saudi Arabia? At the end of the day, they are still a key ally for us in this region. They are our main weapons buyer. They're also the key to containing Iran. If we're going to prevent Iran from selling oil internationally, we're counting on the Saudis to help make up any void that creates in worldwide supply. So the White House has to weigh the long-term relationship with Saudi Arabia against this ugliness that we're seeing right now and figure out how to strike the right balance. It's going to be difficult.
AB, I guess the question is, the Saudis are saying that this developed after a fight in the consulate in Istanbul, and then he was killed. We don't know where the body is. We don't understand what the mission was to begin with, and they're not providing details. They say the investigations are continuing.
Well, John Roberts at the White House was correct that we're going to learn a lot more, and things that sort of interrupt the narrative are going to come up. There were reports that one car went to the airport, to the private plane, and one car went to a forest, where presumably his remains are. So they could be searching there soon. The Turks have played a blatant two-step here. They want to reveal and throw the Saudis under the bus, then they want to pull back. They want to leak to the American press contents of the audio, say that Mike Pompeo listened to it, and then retract. So they're going to be an interesting player in the next few days as the Saudis respond and the U.S. government responds. To Jason's point, I think it's very clear the Trump administration is going to choose long-term interests. They're looking for this is not plausible deniability. No one goes rogue and no one freelances in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But the Saudis believe that this has given the Crown Prince some kind of deniability, and I think the White House was looking for that. And we will probably hear the president say it's their citizen, and they're taking care of it, and some people went rogue.
This guy, Saud al-Qahtani, of the royal court, as an advisor to the royal court, fired pretty close to MBS. I mean, it's getting as close as you can get without saying he knew.
Yeah, this feels like a drip, drip, drip scenario. And the word fight now, I think, has air quotes around it. What did that mean exactly? And we're going to find more about that sooner. Look, I think this gets back down a little bit to Jason and AB, to Donald Trump, and going inside his brain for a moment. And if you do, and I know liberals might not want to get inside that brain, but if you're Donald Trump, you're thinking leverage, you're thinking relationships. And as you both pointed out, I think that's where we're going with this. There's going to be some sort of repercussion. I believe there will. The question is when. Is this a slow as he goes situation? I think it is. I think he'll wait, find out, and then realize that you've got OPEC and oil and Saudi Arabia and all of that. We've got Iran, as Saudi Arabia is a deterrent to that, and of course the proximity to Israel. So all of that combined makes me think that Donald Trump will take this, believe it or not, slowly rather than getting out on Twitter and too fast.
I mean, I said the other day it's like three-dimensional chess. You move one piece, other pieces move on the other boards. But is that, if that's what happens, going to be good enough for Capitol Hill, for...
That was my point. There are already congressmen and women itching for sanctions here. That's only going to escalate as a result of this. So to some extent, they might force President Trump's hand on this. Congress wants to do something, and this will have to rise to a level more than the Treasury Secretary boycotting an investment conference in Saudi Arabia. We're probably talking about sanctions here, talking about freezing assets of high-ranking Saudi officials, limiting their travel to the U.S. Something more serious is going to have to happen.
Okay, breaking news. We're going to continue this discussion with the panel. Again, the Saudis saying Jamal Khashoggi was killed in that consulate. People are, they say, paying the price for it. What does all that mean? After a quick break.